Good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Ready? That's a lot of pictures today. Like for another week like this.
I love it.
Oh, okay. All right. Put my brain together. Here we go. Wake up. Trying to wake up. Wow. Okay, Chevre. Wow. Here we go. These are the foundations of the whole YOMI, ERUVIN. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN DAF Zayin. We are in middle of the sugya that we began on that Vav Amid Beis, quoting a Braisa that's not ERUVIN related exclusively. The Braisa says that a person who picks and chooses, wherever it's more lenient, they follow that opinion. If it's Beis Hillel, they go like Beis Hillel. Mikula Beis Shammai, Beis Shammai. That person is called a Rasha. If a person is going to always pick the Chamurdika opinion from a Machlokes, wherever Beis Hillel is Machmir, they're going to go like Beis Hillel. Wherever Beis Shammai is Machmir, which is the Rav, they follow Beis Shammai. You can't call that person a Rasha. What we learned in the Braisa, that on that person, Shlomo HaMelech says in Koheles that Haksil, that person is foolish. Now we're going to substantially qualify and limit this rule. We're going to go on and we're going to learn various halachas of Tuma and Taro, Tumas oil particularly. We will also have the opportunity to review some of the basic halachas of Trumas U'Maisris, how in the cycle of the 7 years, Truma, Meiser Rishon are always the same, but Meiser Sheni versus Meiser Ani, it depends on what year of the 7-year Shemitah cycle you are at. And on top of that, this is something that most people are familiar with. What people are less familiar with is exactly when these years change. Generally, we say these years change. You're going from the 2nd year into the 3rd year, from the 3rd year into the 4th year by Echad B'Tishrei. And we're going to see that when it comes to fruits, and by fruits, it goes after when the fruit is budding, the Rosh Hashanah for fruit trees is Shvat. And if something budded before Shvat, it's considered the fruit of the 2nd year, as we will explain, the unique exception of an esrog and many other details of Trumas U'Maisris. We're going to introduce the concept of Safek Yediyah. You know, sometimes we don't know what Beis Shammai says. We don't know what Beis Hillel said. There we are machmir. That's not called we are following the chumrah of Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel. We simply don't know what opinion they said. We're going to come back to the laws of ERUVIN. And we're going to learn today 2 general cases. One case will be the case of Mavui Kala L'Rechava. So as we will explain, you have a Mavui that originally was closed off from 3 sides. It was only open to the Reshus Harabim, but then the back wall collapsed and it's opened up now into an area that's behind it. And Rechava means some sort of unused back lot. That back lot, at the end of it, is opened up to the Reshus Harabim. We're going to learn a similar case. We have a Mavui whose side walls completely were breached. not the ones that were towards the front, but the ones that were a little bit deeper in, the side walls that were adjacent to chatzeros. So now you have a case of a mavui shenifritz b'meloy lachatzer, as we'll show pictures. And we're going to learn various rules regarding that. In other words, if I am in a location that theoretically I should be allowed to carry in on Shabbos, but this location is completely open towards another area, which over there I may not carry. So then the rule is I cannot even carry in my area. We're going to have various applications of that. And finally, we're going to speak about a little bit, at least, about the Eruv Chatzeros and the Shitut Movois. And as we mentioned when we opened up this Masechta, that let's never convolute two separate topics, and both always need to be addressed. We began this Masechta learning about how do we define an area that is properly enclosed with mechitzas. Even if you have an area that's completely and properly enclosed with mechitzas, there are times that you may not carry in there nonetheless. And that was the whole takon of Shlomo HaMelech, that even in a reshus hayachid, if you're going from a reshus hayachid that belongs to one owner or to one group of owners, and you're going within that same enclosed area to another piece of property that belongs to another owner or to other owners, even if there is a part, there's a part dual ownership, but it's not exactly under the same ownership. In order for you to be allowed to carry from one to the other, you have to make an Eruv Chatzeros. And we're going to learn how this already will bring us into the dinim that we are learning about in our Masechta, about the Eruv and about the Lechin, about the Koira. We're going to learn finally about the concept of a wall that from one side, it's nira. It looks like a wall, you see the partition. If you're standing in the other side of it, you don't even notice it. It's flush from the other side, and we'll have pictures for all that. And the question will be, is this considered a halachic partition or not? And many, many other dinim that we'll learn on Daf Zayin. I would say that just like Daf Vav was a foundational daf, so is Daf Zayin. We left off 10 lines from the top of the Amid, but it's important to review, mamish, the dinim that we began on Daf Vav. So we learned, amongst other things, yesterday, the following two fundamental dinim. Din number one, what do you need to do by a mavui mefulash? What do you need to do by it? So we had really a braisa at the end of Davav Amud Aleph. We had a machlokes between the Tanakama versus Hananiah's version of Beis Hillel. The Tanakama says that when you have a mavui mefulash, one side needs a tzuras ha-pesach and the other side needs a koira or a lechi, which is a more lenient opinion. Hananiah, in the name of Beis Hillel, says that if you have a mavi that's mefulash, that is open from both ends, one side needs a door, and then the other side will suffice with the koira or with the lechi. Rav paskins leniently like the Tanakama. Shmuel paskins like Hananiah. So that's one thing you have to remember. Then we learned another machlokes on Davav. How do we view a mavui akum? There's a mavui. It doesn't go straight. It bends. A right angle. It's like an L. Or as we learned at the end of the yesterday's sugya, it's a ches. Point is that when you're standing with your back towards the Reshus Harabim and you're looking into the mavui, you don't see through it. You see a wall at the end, but it's not the end of the mavui because the mavui turns to the side. So weiter machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Here Rav was machmir. Rav says it has a din of a mavui mefulash. Shmuel says it has a din of a mavui sasum, and as we explained, we're speaking about a case where the road of the mavui itself is 10 amas or less, 10 amos or less. And as we have been learning, that when you have an opening in a wall that's 10 amos or less, we don't look at it as a pirza. So Shmuel considers it a bona fide mavui sasum. You're looking into it, you see the wall at the end. The fact that it opens up to the side because it goes like an L shape, so what? It's like there's an opening in the wall. Okay, now that we have these two machlokes in, so the last thing we learned yesterday was that in Arda, there was a mavui. And there was a mavui that was super akum. It was a ches, or like Rashi made a picture, it was a U. So what did they paskin? That was the whole challenge we have. So we learned yesterday that the Rami alei chumre de Rav chumre de Shmuel. What did they say? They said, number one, is it a mafulish mavui akum, or is it a mavoi sasum? We're going to be machmir like Rav. It's a mafulish. Now, if it's a mafulish, l'Rav, all you would need to do is to put a patzuras ha-pesach, and then to put a lechi or a koid in the front. But they didn't do that. Now that they paskin that it's in the category of a mavoi mafulish, now we paskin like Shmuel lechumra, that you have to follow Hananya Besilul, and you have to pour doors. You have to really close it off. And if you can look inside, even in the Gemaras on the Vavam and Beis, right, you see the delis and the two angles. That there, according to Rav, it would have been enough just to put up a Eitzuras HaPesach, Koydem Mikan, Koydem Mikan, and Koyd Al Gabov. But no, they paskin like Shmuel. That was the din that we learned yesterday. And the challenge we have is that who says you can do such a thing? Make up your mind. Either paskin like Rav or paskin like Shmuel. If you're paskining like Rav, it's a mavi mafulish. At least paskin like Rav that we follow the Tanakama, and the Eitzuras HaPesach would be enough. If you're following like Shmuel, you don't need anything. I mean, you need something. You need a lechi or a koida where it's adjacent to the Reshus Harabim. But in it, you need nothing at all. So that's l'chura, a classical case where you're going kechumra shel zeh v'kechumra shel zeh. And did we not learn in the Braisa the haksil b'choy shechelach? That was the kasha that we have. And the first approach we learned at Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, 8 lines from the top of the Amud, that even though Rav in the yeshiva when he gave a shiur, he paskind when it comes to the machlekes of the Tanakama versus Hananya, he says that we go like the Tanakama. But that is not the way you paskin halacha l'maisa. If someone were to ask a halachic question, or if Rav would have been giving a halachic shiur, he would have taka paskin like Hananya, like Besilu. So there's nothing, we didn't learn wrong yesterday. Rav, halacha ve'ein moiden kein, not halacha l'maisa, taka paskins like the Tanakama. But poyol mamish, he would be machmed, like we explained the concept, even though be'emes he felt that the Tanakama is correct. But when it comes to certain areas in halacha, and ERUVIN is certainly one of them, where there's a possibility for people to be so lenient that they're going to end up doing the malacha of hoitzah, especially since hoitzah is a malacha gerua, you have to be machmer there. So that was the first approach that we had yesterday, and now we are up to Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, 10 lines from the top of the Amud. And Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Malachenu Sha'akol B'dvarim. And we're going to get off the topic of ERUVIN right now. We're going to significantly limit or qualify this concept that you can't be machmer like this or like that. You got to pick one shita. It's not so pashut that. And when we limit it, it won't pose a question in our case. So Omar, it says the Gemara, Ul Rav Adam Barahavo. Omar Rav, the Omar Halacha Umayrin came. There was another version that when it came to this machlok is the first one that we spoke about today, of how do you make a tikkun in a mavi mafulish. That when Rav paskin like the Tanakama, it wasn't a halacha of ein moedim came. No, that Rav paskin that way. All you need is to have a Eitzuras HaPesach in one side, and then a koida or a lech in the other side. So now we're back to the question. Why were we by that mavi akum in arda? Why did we put the chumrah of Rav and the chumrah of Shmuel? L'chura, right? It's not rishus, but it's foolishness. Why did we do that? This is a very important rule that we're learning right now together. When do we not follow the chumrah? I'll be machmer here and machmer there. That's only only when it is mutually exclusive. And I'm going to give you a case where it's mutually exclusive. Where it's mutually exclusive, it's like a foolish. But whenever it's not mutually exclusive, like over here, we're learning two separate arguments. Argument number one is, how are you masakin a mavi mufulish? More machlekes. Then there's another argument. How do you define a mavi yakum? It's not a stira. You can paskin like kechumra that Rav here and kechumra to Shmuel over there. And they're taka, you're not a fool, which is why they did it so. Now we're looking for a case where paskining like the chumra of one opinion in one case and chumra like the other in the other case is contradicting one each other. And we're going to give a gevaldik example for that. Kigoin, shidra, vigol goylis. Chavra, either this is the first time we all learned this, as we learned in Nida when we were getting ready to come into Eilam Haza, but it's so good to chazer these days. The big difference when it comes to tumas meis and how the remains of a corpse has the koyach to be matame, there is tumas maga umasa versus tumas oil. So even the smallest fragment of a bone of a mace, as we just learned, halacha l'moshe Sinai, and we have an asmachta that an etzem kisa oira is metama b'mago b'mas. An etzem, a fragment of a bone of a corpse, is not metama b'oil. In order for bones to be metama b'oil, you need to have either roiv minyan or roiv binyan. We'll speak about it another time of bones. Or you have to have a amount which amounts to a quarter of a kav of bones, roiva hakav. Or you have to have the shidra, the spinal cord, means the bones of the spinal cord, or the skull. Even though the skull is not roiv minyan and roiv binyan, even though the skull is not roiv atzamais, it is metama ba'oil. Step number one. Step number two, if the spinal cord is deficient, once it's deficient, it's no longer metama ba'oil. Now, again, if you touch it, metama b'maga, even though it's etzem kesoyer. Question is, how do you define deficient? So let's read inside. Ditnan hashidra, the spinal cord, and the spine, the hagul goylus, and the skull. If it's deficient, it no longer is metama tumasoil. And now the question is, how much must be missing from the spine for you to say, it's no longer metame? So Beishamai oimnim shtei chuliyos is two vertebras. Danny, two vertebrae. Here we go. Now, now, my friends, appreciate how this is a chumrah, because that means that according to Beishamai, if only one vertebra is missing, so then it's still metame. It's only when two are missing, only then does it lose its koyach to be metame. Beis Hillel, which is like usual, the more lenient one, he says no. Chuli achas. Even if one vertebra is missing, it's no longer metame. Now we're going to make a correlation between the human anatomy and the animal anatomy. Let's go now to Hilchas Treifa. 1 second. So first we spoke about the spine. Now let's speak about the skull. Same concept. Ubigol goylus. How much of the skull must be missing for it no longer to be able to be metama b'oil? B'shama yoimnim kimeloi makdeach. Makdeach means a drill. Don't think about the drill that you're thinking about. It's not going to work. The makdeach that he's talking about is such a thick drill that the size of the hole is larger than the circumference of a sela coin. It's very large. And only if that amount is missing, then will the skull no longer be metame. If less than that is missing, still considered a skull. Beis Hillel, again, is more lenient. More lenient means that even if a lesser amount of the skull is missing, it will no longer be metame. And how much is less? If the person would have been living, and even a lesser amount of the meloi magdeach, and that Chazal tell us it's the size of a sela, which is less. If that would, God forbid, be taken out of the skull bone, the person would not live. So then we already consider that a deficient skull, that's not metame. Now, let's now put these same dinim when it comes to Hilchas Treifas. What's Hilchas Treifas? If you have an animal, and the animal was slaughtered properly, with alla dinim, but either before or after you discover that the animal had an illness, that it would not have survived for 12 months. Let's go with that pshat and treifa. So then, even though you did a good shchita, and for example, the animal is not going to be tummy b'tumas nevelo, you may not eat it. That's called treif. So let's go now to an animal. If an animal, after you shechted it, you discovered that some of its skull was missing, some of its spine is missing, how much of it must be missing for you to say, ooh, it's treif? Now it's amazing, halkap, that now Shammai, that Beis Shammai, the leniency of Beis Shammai will automatically make a stringency by treifus. Because Beis Shammai says that you need to have a larger amount, right, to take away its status, of tumas oil. That's a chumrah. So if it's only missing one chulia, it's still metame. That's a chumrah. The good side, the lenient side, is that if an animal is missing one chulia, it's not a treif. Not a treif is a leniency, it's a good thing. Beis Hillel that says that if it's only missing one chulia, when it comes to tuma, it loses its koyach to be metame. which is a kula. But that same shita, if it's only missing kimoloi sela, it's no longer metame. That means that if an animal is missing the size of its skull, kimoloi sela, then that animal is already a treifa. That's a chumrah. So here it's interesting. We're not going to count this amongst the chumrei beisilul v'kulei beishamai because they never argued about it. They argued about tuma. All Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel is saying b'chein le'inyan treifa. Now, my friends, what's going to happen if someone is going to paskin when it comes to the dinam of tumah? There, let's say he wants to be machmer. I'm going to go like Beishamai. I'm going to say that if it's only missing one chulya, it is metame. It is metame. When it comes to the hilchas of treifa, I'm going to say that that if it's missing one chulya, that if it's missing only one chulya, it's going to be treif, like Beisilul. That is the ksil. That's the fool. You know why he's foolish? Because it's mamish tarta desasra. It's mutually exclusive. One is built on the other. Once you paskin by tuma, like either one of these opinions, it automatically has its effect on hilchas treifas. That's why you're talking foolish. Avol, the Gemara says, like in our case, there's two different machloikas. One is not built on the other. How are you masakin a mavim foolish? One machloikas. Another machloikas is a mavi akum, a mavim foolish. Another machloikas. Here, there's nothing wrong. Paskin kechumre beishama, kechumre beisilul, as they did in the mavi akum in Nardo. Guys, this is a very important rule. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Why do we do a shkia, for example? Why do we paskin by shkia? When is shkia? We're not consistent. Shabbos in, Shabbos out, for sure not. We're machmir when Shabbos is in. We have an earlier shkia. We have a much later shkia and a much later tzeis when it comes to Shabbos out. Hold on to this thought for a second. But anyways, here we have a very big klal. Tarta de sasra, you have to pick one side. If it's not tarta de sasra, you could be machmir like this here and machmir like that there, and you're not called exil. And that takes away our question. Asks the Gemara, wherever it's mutually exclusive, loyavdinan can be. We learned in a brayso. Before we read the Maisa of Rabbi Akiva, let's chazer the following. In the cycle of a 7-year Shemitah cycle in Eretz Yisrael, as we know that in the first year of the 7 years, whatever needs to be tithed, midrabanan, first you take off Truma Gedolah, then you take off Maisa Edition. You have to give that to the lady. From what remains, if you are in the first year or the second year, you take off Meiser Sheni. In the third year, you take off Meiser Ani. Meiser Ani is in the place of Meiser Sheni. Fourth and fifth, Truma Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni. And in the sixth, Truma Meiser Rishon, Meiser Ani. Aleph. Base. When exactly do you go from the first year to the second year? When do you go from the second year to the third year? So generally, it's correct to say, Echad B'Tishrei is the Rosh Hashanah. But when it comes to fruits, let's go Lakula Alma that we're speaking about olives. Olives has to be tithed midoraisa, even according to those opinions that say that generally tithing fruits is only midrabanan, but that's not when it comes to tirash and yitzar. Olives and grapes have to be tithed midoraisa or tithing midrabanan. Now, when it comes to fruits, this is the way it works. Shvat, when we say it's the Rosh Hashanah Li'Ilanos, before we get into the question, is it Echad B'Shvat or Tu B'Shvat? Shvat means that, listen, guys, if the year you entered the third year, Rosh Hashanah, Echad Tishrei, but you are before the month of Shvat, and a fruit began to bud, that's called Chanata, by Peter Se'il and Basar Chat. If it began to bud before Shvat, it's considered a fruit of the second year. And therefore, Truma Gedolah, Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni. Only if it began, if the Chanata came out after Rosh Hashanah Li'Ilanos, only then do we consider it's from the third year. Step number 2, my friends. There's an exception to that. There is one fruit that doesn't follow Basar Chanata. There's one fruit that it follows for this din, like vegetables, it's Basar Likita. When did you harvest it? Okay, so by the Esrei, it's the harvesting that determines what year it belongs to. If you harvested it before Shvat, it's from the second year. That means it has to be included in Truma Gedola, Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni. Only if it was harvested after Rosh Hashanah Li'Lanos do we say, now it's in the third year. Now comes the kasha, exactly when in Shvat. So we are familiar with the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, right? The Arba Rosh Hashanahs, one of which is Rosh Hashanah Li'Lanos, and we know, because the Torah Shabbat Ped now is written down, you open up your Gemara, open up your Mishnah, Beis Shammai says Echad B'Shvat, Beis Hillel says Tu B'Shvat. Rabbi Akiva didn't know. Rabbi Akiva didn't know. He didn't know, and he didn't have whom to ask. He didn't know who said what. So in order for him to cover all his bases, right? So if there was a esrog that was harvested between Echad B'Shvat and Tu B'Shvat, so the question is it from the second year or is it from the third year? Are you mechuyev to take off Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani? He did both. Meiser that Rabbi Akiva Shalik he harvested an esrog. Be'echad b'shvat. No, it really can be be'echad, it can be b'sheni, it can be b'shlishi. Ma'aser shehoya kacha. It was already on echad b'shvat, and since he did not know, that's the beginning, whether we go like Beis Shammai or like Beis Hillel, the nahag boy bezi suran. He took off 2 maasers. In other words, aside of Meiser Rishon, he took off 3 maasers. He took off Truma Gedola. Then he took off 10% Meiser Rishon. Now the din is that from what remains, you take off another 10%. From what remains, he took off 20%. Meiser Sheni and Meiser Ani, Kedivrei Beis Shammai, the Echad Kedivrei Beis Hillel. And l'chayra, this is a tarta de sasra. Make up your mind. Tarta de sasra. Do you paskin like Beis Shammai? Do you paskin like Beis Hillel? Can't follow both. Right? Like I meant, shiur de Rabbeinu Tam. Is it yeah or is it not? So says the Gemara, answers the Gemara, oh, that is different. Rabbi Akiva, Gemara is topically. Rabbi Akiva had a doubt. It's called a Safek Yediyah. He did not know which Shita came from whom. The Layada I Beis Hillel is the one that says B'chad B'Shvat Amor, or I B'chameser B'Shvat Amor. Rabbi Akiva knows you paskin like Beis Hillel. He wasn't being we paskin like Beis Hillel. I don't know what Beis Hillel said. So a Safek Yediyah, for you to be machmer, that's not a problem. That's not a problem. And to speak big kitzur the following. Similarly, when there was a time of a Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin paskint halachic Beis Hillel, even if we're going to follow the shita that we had on top of the Amid, that the loy mashgach bebaskoil, right? So we can still somehow say, I want to always follow Beis Shammai. That's one thing. Sometimes we tolerate it as long as you are consistent. That's what we learned in the sugya. But nowadays, this is the challenge we have nowadays. We don't have an absolute Sanhedrin. So when it comes to many questions in halacha, we pasha don't know who we paskin like. Whenever you don't know who you paskin like, and we're speaking especially about Isura D'Oraisa, like Shabbos, when does Shabbos begin? Or Tefillin, we put on Nashi, we put on Rabbeinu Tam. Yes, it's Tarta de Sasre, because God said one. There's one right Seder. I know that Elu ve'elu divrei lekim chaim, but I'm saying in halacha, in Olam hazeh gashmi, one sheet is correct. But if you have a doubt, especially when it comes to a din Torah, now we are noyig many times to be machmer like both. So I know that this throws a wrench into this whole sugya, but it's already 6:30 and we got to move on. But this is a huge topic, and ERUVIN Daf Zayin is one of the huge sources. This is discussed in other places as well, as this concept of one thing is for sure, to be makel like this and makel like that, that's called a rasha. Again, it's a chassidish rasha. We're not speaking about a rush. He's working within the framework of halacha, but that's already a wickedness. Sometimes we say chumrik kazeh, you're ksil. But it's not as very simple the way we left it off yesterday. And we'll leave it at that, and let's continue. Okay. Now we're coming back. We're falling back to Hilchos ERUVIN. Now we're going to ask for Dr. Daniel to get ready here with the pictures. Guys, just like the rules we learned yesterday were foundations in ERUVIN, the concept of a Mavi Mefulash, Mavi Yakum, we're going to learn foundational principles that are negeh for ERUVIN. And if you have the pictures, it's easy. This challenge that you might find is simply you don't have the picture in your mind. It's a technical challenge, and Baruch Hashem, or there's definitely less yigia needed for good and bad. Okay, the two dots. Yosef Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef is sitting in front of Rafuna, and the Yosef Ka'amah. What's happening now is that Rabbi Yosef is going to repeat the din in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, but there are two parts of what he's saying. The first part is clearly, Rabbi Yosef is saying that which Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav. And as we know, that Rabbi Yehuda was Taka Talmidoi Shel Rav until the passing, until the Istalkos of Rav. After Rav was Nistalik, Rabbi Yehuda became the Talmud of Shmuel. So when we know that Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav, or Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Shmuel, we know who it's coming from. But whenever we hear someone quoting Rabbi Yehuda, then you right away need to ask, is that din from Rav or from Shmuel? The first statement we know, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav. And what did he say? This is Rabbi Yosef quoting Rabbi Yehuda, quoting Rav. That machloikas, that we go back to the first machloikas we spoke about in our intro today. And that is that when you have a mavi mefulash, what do you need to do to be allowed to carry in it? So what did we learn? Tanakama holds relatively easier. Of one side, Tzuras HaPesach. You don't need a door, Tzuras HaPesach. And the other side, already either a kaida or a lechi. Hanania says that Basil says, no, foolish. One side needs a door. And as we learned yesterday, do you have to close the door, or does there have to be the potential to close the door? A more chamer dik opinion. You know when you have this machlokes, says Rav, only when it's the mavoi is in between two Rishuyoy Sarabim, and they are bona fide Rishu Sarabims. And one way you call it, one way that the Gemara or Torah Shabbat Peh refers to it, Rishu Sarabim is Seratia and Palatia. Seratia is a highway, a thoroughfare, and a Palatia is a huge plaza. Either Bisaratia Mikan, or Upalatia Mikan. That is the case that we spoke about yesterday. Since each side of the Mavi goes directly into a Rishus Harabim, you got a problem. Now, how much work do you need to do? Say that Tanakama is more lenient, Hanani is more machmer, but you got to schwitz. Both sides need a tikkun. Avol, but what happens if tackle one side, Seratia Mikan, which is the case, the opening case of our Mishnah. But on the other side, it's open, but it's not open into a biblical Rishus Harabim. It's opened into a rabbinic Rishus Harabim. So, for example, it's a bika, ubika mikan. A bika has a din of a cardinalist. It's an open field. Or now this or will be modified, or both sides are only open into a rabbinic Rishus Harabim. Like bika mikan, ubika mikan. Since, thank you, no, take that away. Okay, since both sides are not directly in a Rishus Harabim, it's less problematic. Less problematic doesn't mean that both sides don't need a tikkun. Both sides need a tikkun. But here, even Hanania will agree that Basil agrees, like the Tanakama, that all you need is a Tzuras HaPesach Mikan and a Lechi Yorkoida Mikan. Oisa Tzuras HaPesach Mikan, the Lechi Yorkoida Mikan. End of quote. Before we continue, the obvious question is, Hashta Seratia Mikan or Bika Mikan. Even if one side is open to a Rishus Harabim, one side is opened up to a rabbinic Rishus Harabim, which is less problematic. It's already enough. Likula Alma, even Tachanania. Why did the Rav have to give the second case? So Bika Mikan or Bika Mikan Miboya, Avada, it's a less of a problem. Says the Gemara, yeah, we gotta you got the words wrong. That Haki Ka'amar are a few lines before the bottom of the Amid. Seratia Mikan or Bika Mikan, Nase Ke Bika Mikan or Bika Mikan, and therefore, all you need, Kula Alma, Tzuras HaPesach, and Lechi and Okayim. Guys, this is just the intro. Now, Daniel, doctor, please put up that picture. Now, U'Mesayim B'Mishmei, the Rav Yehuda. Now Rav Yosef continued. Oh, thank you. Leave it. Good. Now, listen to this. This statement, Rav Yosef is quoting Rav Yehuda, but he didn't say whether Rav Yehuda said this Amar Rav or Amar Shmuel. Stam Rav Yehuda. Guys, take a look at the picture. Right, the Rishus Harabim is the closest to you. It goes into a mavui. When the mavui was built, as you can see, there was a chutzner on the right and a chutzner on the left. And in each chutzner, there are two houses. Now, the back of the chutzner is open. It's called the mavui mefulash. But it b'chlal doesn't go. It doesn't go into a Rishus Harabim. It's not going into a cardinalist. It's not going into a bika. It's going into what we call a rechava. Rechava, if you can notice, and the picture is a great picture, you see that there are no doors. There are no doors from the house into the back lot, calling a back lot. No doors. In other words, it's some sort of, it's like today in LA, if you have a home, and Hashem should bless all you guys to own a home, you have a little garage, and behind the garage, right? We call this in Shabbos, we call this the muktzah. Muktzah means an area that people hardly go into. That's called the backlot, the rechava. Now the rechava is open to a Reshus Harabim, not to a Carmelis, not to a Bika. The backlot is open to a bona fide Reshus Harabim. But since this mavui is not one end Reshus Harabim, the other end Reshus Harabim, it's not even one end Reshus Harabim, the other end Carmelis. The other end, the back end of the mavui goes into a location that is barely used by anyone, called the rechava. So says Rav Yehuda, look at this, Ein Sarach Klum. Ein Sarach Klum, obviously, my friends, the opening of a mavui needs a lechi, as he put in the picture, or a koira. Ein Sarach Klum, second to last line, means that in the back, from the mavui to the back lot, not only do you not need a door, you don't even need a tzuras HaPesach. You need nothing. You need nothing. In other words, we don't view this as a mavui mefulish. It's like a mavui sasum. Now, this will have to be clarified as we'll get into the sugya, and a lot will finish tomorrow in Daf Ches. You can argue why nothing. At the end of the day, when you're standing in the Reshus Harabim, take a look. You're going to see the Reshus Harabim from the other side. L'chora, there should be a mavui. Leave that question open. But before we analyze the rationale behind it, Amalei Abaya, let Rabbi Yosef, the last line of the Amid. Very nice. The first statement you quoted, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. The second statement of Mavui Kala L'Rachava, this Kula leniency, you quoted just Rav Yehuda. I know that it must be Mishmei de Shmuel. Not because I know what Shmuel says. I know what Rav says. And Rav will not agree with this. So I have to deduce, since it can be in the name of Rav, how the Rav Yehuda must be the Shmueli turning to Rav Zayin on his base. Don't illude yourself that it's a little limit. It's no little limit. Why? Because if this, you can leave the picture up. The either Rav, leave the picture up, or put on the next picture. There's the next picture. Either Rav, if this would have been in the name of Rav, yes, leave that picture up, then Kasha, the Rav, the Tarte. I'm going to quote you another Rav, and I'm going to extrapolate that there are two arguments between what we just learned on Amud Aleph, Bishmei de Rav Yehuda, we don't know from whom, and this statement of Rav. The Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav. Now we have not Rav Yosef, now we have Rav Yirmiyah quoting Rav. Mavui shenifratz b'meloi l'chatzer. Look inside the pictures, my friend. When the person built a mavui, let me tell you what used to be. That's the only picture that they could have maybe made better. You have the Reshus Harabim, that's the closest to you. You enter the mavui, you have a chatzer mikan v'chatzer mikan. There used to be a continuation of the side walls that went all the way to the back. Because as you can notice in the back here, you do have doors in the houses. You can see the door to the house on the right. Very good. So the wall used to go all the way to the back. And this is important, the back wall was closed off. You began with a simple Pashat Mavui Sasum. And the builder wasn't one of our chevre. It was the competition of ours that don't know what they're doing. And in a short amount of time, the walls fell down. What walls fell down? The walls of the Mavui, the right and the left wall of the Mavui, closer to the Reshus Harabim stands. But when it comes to the second half of the Mavui, both Mavui walls, the walls that separated the Mavui from the Chatzar, they both fell down. So what really happens now is that the Chatzar ends up being much wider than the Mavui, and we'll call the whole back a Chatzar, because there's no longer an alleyway, there's no longer walls. That's number one, what happened. Now this is very similar to the case we had on Amud Aleph, right? The only difference is that on Amud Aleph we learned about a back lot, a rechava, and they were learning about a chatzar. On top of that, let's just read the next few words in the third line in the Amid. The nifritz a chatzar kenegdoi. That now the back wall in the back of the Mavui, it used to be a Mavui Sasam that fell, right? It became breached, and now it opens up to the Reshus Harabim. Rav spoke about such a case, and Rav paskind like this, that chatzar muteres. You can carry in the chatzar. Guys, take a look inside the chatzar. You'll notice that you have 4 walls in this chatzar. How do you have 4 walls in this chatzar? Because if you're standing in the chatzar, even though, well, the house to one side, the house to the other side, wall. There's a door going into the house. It's important to remember that a Pesach is not mevatel a partition, as long as the halal is not wider than 10 amos. Same thing, the mavui, the alley of the mavui is not wider than 10 amos, and the breach in the back wall is not wider than 10 amos. So I'm going to argue that you have a proper enclosed area. So therefore, Raf says, chatzin muteres. But Raf says, mavui is asur. Now, guys, look in the picture. Look how great it is. This mavui has a lechi in the front. Nevertheless, Raf says that the mavui is asur. So first of all, just this, you can say this is already a machlekes. It's not like Rav Yehuda, because how is this different than the case we had on Amud Aleph? It's the same thing. And if Rav Yehuda is saying that since the backside of the mavui does not go straight into a Reshus HaRabim, it doesn't even go straight into a Carmelis. It goes into another Reshus HaYachid, even though the other Reshus HaYachid is open in the back. Rav Yehuda says the mavui ain't sort of klum in the back. Here, Rav says asur. So that's one. Now, where is the other? Why does the Gemara say that kasha derav betarte? So here's the havamina, my friends. This is very important. And as we spoke in our intro, the concept of parutz b'meloyoi l'mekayim ha'asrloi. We are presuming now that no eruv chatzeres was made here. No shituv mavois was made here, like we spoke on our intro. Atkan until Daf Zayin, we never spoke about this. We only spoke about, you have to have an area that is partitioned off. And we said that midoraisa 3 walls are enough. But in the case where the mavui opens up to a Reshus HaRabim, mishum ekeda, mishum echitz, you got to put something on the 4th side. Put that aside. Let's say you have a fully partitioned area. The people that live in the front of the mavui, right? The people that live in the front of the mavui, their ownership is not in the chutzner of the back at all. They share the mavui area. They have common mavui, but they have no partnership with the chatzeros. The people the 2 houses in the back, only they own their yards. The guys that live in the front have no ownership in there. And therefore, the people that live in the front, right, just be aware of that, they cannot carry, there's no Edo over here, and therefore they cannot carry in the chutzner. Since they cannot carry in the chutzner, that means they can't take something from the mavui in the front, they can't take it into the chutzner. There was no eruv chatzeder shitum mavos made. So there's a rule. Whenever you have 2 private domains that are back to back, they are adjacent, like the front mavui and the back chutzner. If the entire wall separating one reshus from the other is completely breached, it's called parutz b'meloyoi l'mekayim ha'asrloi. Guys, and make believe you're standing in the mavui. You have the 2 walls that are narrowing you in. The only separation that's separating the people standing in the mavui to the back chutzner would have been a wall. There is no wall there. It's completely opened. It's completely opened. So the rule is, since the bnei hamavui cannot carry in the chutzner because there's no eruv, and the havamina is that there's no eruv, so not only may they not carry in the chutzner, they may not carry in the mavui. Because since the mavui opens into an area in which you may not carry, if there is no wall at all, you may not even carry in the domain that's adjacent to the mekayim ha'asrloi. Okay? So that's the understanding just of this concept. Now here's the question. For that, you don't need to have the back wall breached at all, going from the chutzner into the Reshus HaRabim, in order for you to assert carrying in the mavui. You don't need that at all. So why did we mention that the back is open over here? Why did Rab give a case that the back is open? Rab gave a case that the back is open in order for us to deduce from it that if the back would have been closed, then l'chora you would be allowed to carry in the mavui. Which l'chora means that Rav disagrees with this din of Parutz b'Meloy l'Mekayim ha'asur lo becomes asur. Again, because if Rav would subscribe to that, then he would not have to say that the back from the Chatzar to the Rosh Hashanah breached for him to asur carrying in the Mavul. We are assuming that Rabbi Yehuda does subscribe Parutz b'Meloy l'Mekayim ha'asur lo does not allow you to carry. And by the way, now we understand why did Rabbi Yehuda give a case where you have a rechava? Why didn't Rabbi Yehuda and Amud Aleph give the same case of a chatzar? And the answer is obviously because according to Rabbi Yehuda, if it would have opened up to a chatzar, then he would have said you're not allowed to carry in the mavi because parutz b'meloy l'mekayim ha'asur lo is something that Rabbi Yehuda asers. Elama, he spoke about a case where the mavi is opened up to a rechava. A rechava, it's important to know this, a back lot, since hardly anyone uses it, you don't need to make an eruv chatzeris to go there. You don't need to make a shit of mavais. So the reason why he used the case of a rechava was only there are you allowed to carry in the mavi. Rabbi Yehuda would have been machmer, and he would not have allowed you to carry here, even if the back wall from the chatzar to the Rosh Hashanah would have been standing. So these are two areas. L'chu'ura, number one, we see over here that Rav considers this an open. It's open. It's asur. Rabbi Yehuda holds that we don't care that if behind the back lot it's open. It's not open. It's not a mavi mefulash. And number two, l'chu'ura, there was a machlokes between Rav and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda subscribes to parutz b'meloy l'mekayim ha'asur lo is asur, which is why Rabbi Yehuda gave a case of a back lot. He would not give this case. And Rav gave this case dafka of the chatzar being breached, because if there would not be a breach in the back of the chatzar to the Rosh Hashanah, Rav would say that you are allowed to carry in the mavi. You are allowed to carry. It's parutz b'meloy l'mekayim ha'asur lo means she holds it's mutter. So there are two arguments. So therefore, Abai is saying that the statement that Rabbi Yosef quoted Rabbi Yehuda, the latter statement, must have been b'shmei d'shmuel. But Amai, l'chora, this case, lehevi k'mavi shekala l'rechava, like we explained. And now l'chora would hold that you cannot carry also if it's open to a rechava, if it's open to the back, because it's considered a mavi mefulash. And indeed, Amalei says, Rabbi Yosef, you're right, I'm not arguing with you. I don't know from whom did Rabbi Yehuda learn the din of the mavui shekala l'rechava. I don't know that. Let me tell you why I know. That uvda hava b'dura b'ravasa. There was a shepherd's village. And over there was a case that there was a mavui shekala l'rechava. And they went and they asked Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda says that if you have a lechi in the front or a kite in the front, mavi to the Rishus Rabim, you need nothing. I know for sure that Rabbi Yehuda said it. It looks like Rav disagrees with that, as we just learned now on top of Amud Beis and the Hanami. I'm good to heavy Mishmei de Shmuel, and therefore V'lei Kasha Mida. So according to this statement, we are acknowledging that there is a machlokes really between Rav and Shmuel, and it's a double machlokes. That Rav does not subscribe to parutz b'meloy l'mekayim ha'asur lo is asur. Shmuel does, which is why he only was matir in the case of a rechava. On the other hand, how do you view this? It's Rishus Rabim, mavui, something Rishus Rabim. And it's opened. Is it called a mavui that's mefulash? Again, l'chora, according to him, he's saying machlokes. Rav Shmuel holds it's not called a mavui mefulash, and Rav holds it is called a mavui mefulash, which is why Rav says you may not carry in the mavui. So says the Gemara, I disagree with that. They don't argue. You don't understand the case that we spoke about here on Amud Beis. Hashta, now, in light of the fact the Amma laid up Sheshes, let up Shmuel bar Abba, or the Amnila let up Yosef bar Abba, that Asbir Allah, let me explain to you Shitas Rav. You can put the picture back up, Daniel. Let me explain to you the picture that we learned on Amud Beis. Not the case of the Rechava, but this case of the Chatzir, that what we said is based on the presumption that no Eruv was made. Again, the Eruv Chatzeru Shituv Mavais. Kan she'irvu, kan she'liver. There's a difference whether an Eruv was made or not. So let's go into this parutz b'meloy l'mekayim ha'asur lo. Rav and Rav Yehuda agree, same shita, that whenever you are in one area that's fully open to a second area, if you may not carry in the second area, the mela you can't carry in the first area. When there is no eruv, then you know what Rav would hold? Rav would hold that even if the wall between the Chatzar and the Rosh Hashanah would have not fallen down, would have not been breached, even there you would not be allowed to carry in the Mavui, because the Mavui is open to the Chatzar. If there is no eruv, you can't carry in the Mavui, L'kula Alma. Why did Rav give a case where the wall in the back, the wall between Chatzar and the Rosh Hashanah was breached? Was because he's telling you that even if there was an eruv, so you have here a parutz b'maloi l'makayim she'ein asur loi. Nevertheless, like we explained, it's considered a mavi mafulash. However, what about this machlekes over here? If it's a mavi mafulash, then why is it that on Amud Aleph, if Rav Yehuda would have been quoting even Rav over there, it's not considered a mavi mafulash? Oh, so here, look inside the Rashi, the last narrow line going into the wide lines, kan she'ervu, kan she'le'ervu, koloimer, hai mavui asur dika amarav, yesh chiluk bedavar. She'pa'amim asur, u'pa'amim takamuter. Meaning, if irvu b'nei ha'chatzin and b'nei ha'mavui, so it's not part of b'maloi l'makayim ha'asur loi, only then b'nei mavui mutarin. If the back wall was not breached, if the back wall did not collapse. The Hada Asalei, Rav, the reason why he said it's a problem is not because there was a breach. Lav mishum foolish ka'asar, in the case where there was an eruv, like we'll explain in a moment. And what case will that be? So let's already read in Rashi. There's another very important nuance. What's important is when you are standing in the front of this mavui, right? Look at the picture, you're standing in the Rosh Hashanah that's close to you. Are you able to see the other Rosh Hashanah? Well, the way this picture is drawn, yes, you could. Why could you? Because the width of the beginning of the mavui is aligned with the breach in the wall in the back. That's called you can see through it. That's something else. Here, L'kula Alma, even according to what we learned in Amud Aleph, that he says V'loi Klum, no, there you'll have to put a Tzuras HaPesach on the other side, because you can see through it. The case that we are speaking over here is that the wall between the Chatzar and the Rosh Hashanah is either to the right, the breach is to the right, the breach is to the left. So when you are standing in one Rosh Hashanah, when you look, you see at the end of the wall. That's different. Now, if that's the case, if that's the case, that if there is no eruv and shituf mavois, even then you would not be allowed to carry in the mavui. Then why did Rav and Amud Beis give a case where the wall broke in the back? Why? Even if it would not break to the back, if there was no eruv, then you have a parutz b'maloi l'makayim ha'asur loi. So why did he have to give a case where it was breached? That's the chiddush. Chiddush is he's speaking about the revusa the chatzar nakad. Don't forget that Rav made statement number one. Statement number one is that the chatzir is mutter. You know when the chatzir is mutter, even if there's a breach in the wall. The af al gav, the rabim nechnasim la bezu v'yoytzim la bezu. Even though people are able to walk through this whole area, going from the Rishus Rabim in the back end to the front, or from the front to the back, afilu hachesharia. Why is that? There's a breach in the wall. Now, guys, put yourselves in the chutzner. How many walls does the chutzner have? So now that's going to go into another question. The question is, like we spoke in the intro, from the perspective of the guy standing in the chutzner, there are four walls, right? There's the back wall. Yes, there's an opening. If it's not more than 10 amas, it's called a Pesach. Then you have the house to the right, you have the house to the left. If you are in the chutzner and you turn to face the mavui, you have two walls, and there's an opening in the wall also. From the perspective of the chutzner, you have a mechitza. You know where you don't have a mechitza? If you're standing in the mavui and you're looking at the chutzner, you don't see any mechitza on that side. You see, when you're standing in the mavui, Daniel, go a little bit further, the wall to the right and the wall to the left, the wall to the right and the wall to the left, not that wall, not that wall, the wall that's going to the other angle. The wall that's going to the other angle, that wall. See, you don't see that when you're in the mavui. So is that called a wall or not? So Rav is being machadesh that it is called a wall. Why is it called a wall? Now, it's not a wall for the Bnei HaMavui. It's not a wall for the it's a wall for the Bnei HaChatzer. Bnei HaChatzer, it's a wall. It's flush. It's only flush if you're standing in the mavui. If you're standing in the Chatzer, you see both sides. So therefore, Rav made another chiddush that even if the back of the Chatzer to the Reshus Rabim is breached, you can carry in the Chatzer. Let's read it back in the Gemara. So Asbedullah and 3 lines from the bottom. Kan Shiva Kan Shalei Irvu. So the Rav Namalei Kasha. It's not a Rav Yehuda and Ahmed Aleph quoted Rav, and it doesn't contradict each other. Kan She'irvu, but in Bnei Chatzer, in Bnei Mavui, and Kan Shalei Irvu Gavaldik. And according to this is very important. Everyone subscribes that if there's an opening in one end, so you have Mavui, something, either at a Chava or a Chatzer, and then you have a breach going into a Reshus Rabim, it's going to depend. If both openings are aligned, so when you are standing in one, then you can see through it, it's called the Mavi Mefulish. When we learned on Amid Aleph, no, you don't need anything. That's because the breach in the back wall was to the right or to the left. You cannot see through it. Everyone subscribes according to this maskana that products does not allow you to carry. If there was an eruv, then you could carry. And then we learned the third topic that the chiddush of Rav and Amid Beis is that even though the wall between the Chatzer and the Reshus Rabim is breached, in the Chatzer you have 4 walls. People walk directly from the Reshus Rabim to the Chatzer. Who cares? If you're standing in a location that has 4 walls, every wall has the din of a mechitza, then you're allowed to carry in it. Now let's go to DAF Ches. You have another few minutes, which is Gavaldik. We're already in it. We got the whole thing. It's interesting that the Gemara is going back to the Salka Baitach. Ulamai the Salka Nadat in Mikara. That, which is really the first shita, that what we learned on Amud Aleph has to be Mishmei de Shmuel. And when we learned on Amud Beis is Mishmei de Rav, and they disagree with each other, like we said in both dinim. So you should know the Avamina was the disagree. Now that you threw another concept of Eruv or no Eruv, Bein she'irvu, Bein she'le'irvu pligi. And the Gemara explains, the Irvu b'may pligi, even if there's an Eruv, so it's not Parutz b'maloi l'mekayim ha'asur, right? And the only reason why it would be usher to carry is because the back wall is breached. So that's the machlokes. B'shaloi. So when the Gemara asks, so be'irvu b'may pligi, b'shaloi b'may pligi, explains the Gemara. B'shaloi irvu, if there was no Eruv made, and there's no Eruv made, and therefore it's parutz b'maloi l'mekayim ha'asur, which is why you cannot carry in the mavui. But there will be a machlokes whether you can carry in the Chatzer. There will be a machlokes whether you can carry in the Chatzer. That benira mibachutz v'shavim b'fnim. Only Rav is lenient, and he says that you can carry in the Chatzer because the Chatzer has a wall. The wall that is from the Bnei HaChatzer going into the front, that's called the wall. When you're standing in the mavui, you can't see that wall. I don't care. Shmuel will hold on Amud Aleph, if we're going to say that Rabbi was Amud Aleph, that you may not even carry in the Chatzer. You know why? Because the Chatzer does not have 4 walls. And Midrabanan, even when you have 3 walls, you don't have 4 walls, you got a problem. Okay. And furthermore, so the Chatzer is opened into the Mavui. If there's no Eruv, the Bnei HaChatzer cannot carry in the front. They can't carry in the front. So then, since it's parutz b'maloi fully opened, you can carry in the Chatzer. And also, like we explained, in the case where there is an Eruv, so you can carry from one part of the Mavui to the back and the back to the front, what would be the machlokes? Bid Rabbi Yehuda, bid Rabbi Yosef. The Amid Rabbi Yosef says that Loishanu, when we learned on Amid Aleph, that you don't have to do anything. That's Ella Shekala Le'emsa Rechava. That's only if the opening from the Rechava to the Reshus Rabim, right, is not in the middle. It's not in the middle, is closed. It's not see-through. Avokalo, let's say the Rechava is Asur, In other words, Shmuel is going to hold. That's not this case. That's not this case. Let's get another picture. What happens if one side is completely flush to the back and one side is not? Let's get another picture, Danielle.
Sorry, Rabbi, there's no picture.
There's no picture. There is a picture.
Look at the one I just posted in the WhatsApp group.
There's a picture. There's going to be a picture where it's partially open to the back and partially not. That there also you have a machloikas, in which Shmuel is going to be the one that holds it's okay. Very good, good picture. So if you're looking at the right wall, it goes all the way to the back, all the way. There's nothing stopping it. So in this case, the Rabbi is going to hold that's a mavi mefulash. That's a mavi mefulash. Even though the back is this back lot at a chava, Shmuel will hold that this is okay. Why is it okay? Because it's not fully, the both sides of the entrance is not aligned with both sides in the entrance on the other side. If you look to the right, it's not aligned completely, correct? Like in the picture over here, the left back is much wider. So therefore, we don't consider this a mavi mefulash. Very good. We don't consider this a mavi mefulash, and Shmuel will be lenient and I will be machmir. It's amazing. We're going to stop over here. How the Gemara is telling you what the machloekas would have been according to the Havamina. But the bottom line is, we are concluding that Rav and Shmuel do not disagree. Everyone subscribes to Parad's B'Meloy. Everyone is going to say, now we're not addressing this case in the Maskana. Everyone is going to say that when is it not a mavi mefulash when you cannot see through it at all? My friends, to be continued. Are we good, guys?
Amazing. Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, that was completely simple, Rabbi. Thank you.
Super easy. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Rabbi, can you explain one thing? According to the situation where you have the chutzner and the mavoi, and the mavoi is going right into the chutzner, so we said that there's a disagreement whether the people of the chutzner, whether it's considered having 4 walls or them having 3 walls, right? So in this scenario, are we saying that Rav or Shmuel would say that the people of the chutzner could carry into the mavoi back and forth, but the people of mavoi can't carry at all in the mavoi?
I mean, that case is where there was no eruv,
Right.
and the rule is that when the wall is fully breached, Rav says the Bnei HaChatzer is not fully breached into the mavoi. It's not fully breached because if they go from the Chatzer to the mavoi, there is some wall to the right and some wall to the left.
Right.
Shmuel, that is Rav. Shmuel would be machmer here, according to this version. That's the Havamina. Shmuel would say no, that since from the mavoi to the Chatzer there is no wall, it's considered no wall. And if it's no wall, since it's considered parutz b'meloy, you can't even carry in the Chatzer. That's what you can't even carry in the Chatzer when there's no eruv. That's the rule. The rule is that
but at least according to Shmuel there, it would be consistent. The people in the Chatzer can't carry, and the people in the mavoi can't carry.
Correct.
Whereas according to Rav, the people in the Chatzer can carry in the Chatzer.
Very good.
And the mavoi.
No. They can't carry in the mavoi. That's what Rav
So
said.
the people in the mavoi can't carry at all in the mavoi. The people in the Chatzer or in the Chatzer.
The Chatzer can carry in the Chatzer area because it's not called parutz b'meloy.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, good guys.
Shkoyach. Excellent. Very simple.